Hi, this is Pastor Johnny here. I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this message. I pray that God will speak to you through it, that you'll be both challenged and encouraged by what you hear. Thanks again. God bless.
This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, "Does this offend you? Does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe." For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and would betray him. He went on to say, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them." Verse 66 says, "From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him." Wow. Many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Can I talk to you today on the God of inconvenience? The God of inconvenience. A couple of weekends ago, I was supposed to be speaking at Jackie and Bradley's outreach in Dunkern. Start at 7:30. Start with a bit of worship as you normally do. And about half an hour into the worship, around about close to 8 o'clock, I get a phone call, and it's from my wife, from Gemma. And Gemma knows where I am, so I know that if Gemma's calling, then something's wrong. Gemma wouldn't phone me unless it was an emergency, so I go out and I phone her back. We managed to get in contact, and she says, "Eli has fallen off his bike and he's broke his leg. We're on our way to the Mater Hospital." And I'm like, right, okay. You talk about an inconvenience. I mean, let's be honest. Kids are an inconvenience at the best of times. But you throw in a broken leg 5 or 10 minutes before you're supposed to get up and preach. I mean, come on. Of any of the times, surely you could have picked a better time to break your leg than 5 minutes before I'm about to speak. So I make my way back into the hall, and Jackie's at the back of the hall, and I say, "Tell her, Jackie, Eli's broke his leg." She says, go and make sure he's okay. So my dad had managed to pick him up, got him into the car. He's screaming because he's broke his leg, gets him down to the Mater Hospital. I'm in the car, and I'm making my way to the Mater Hospital. This is an inconvenience, Eli. Get into the Mater Hospital, and he's sitting in the A&E. And he's got his leg, and his right leg, and it's up here, and he won't move it, and he's starting to shake, because of the shock of what's happened. By this time, his details have already been given in to the reception, and so we're just waiting on the triage nurse to come out to take him in to go through what they go through and to take you on to the next section or the next part of this journey. And at that stage, I come in through the doors. And as I come in through the doors, the triage nurse calls his name. So by this stage, you're normally sitting there around about 5 minutes, having given the details. Normally sitting there about 5 minutes, and she calls his name. And I try to lift him, and he starts screaming in the middle of A&E. So I say, "Okay, stay there. Don't move. I'll go in." So I go into the triage nurse and explain to her that he can't move. "Can you come out and see him outside?" She says, "Okay, hold on. Give us some of his details." Eli, age 4, 5, I think he's 5. And so I'm in shock myself, and she says to me, "Okay, listen, we don't take kids anymore under the age of 14. Yes, that was my response too. What? Why could we not be told this upon coming in and giving the details at the reception? Why do I have to be sitting here for the last 5 or 10 minutes with him in agony for you to tell us that you don't take kids under the age of 14? This is an inconvenience to me. The broken leg was an inconvenience. Having to leave Bradley and Jackie's was an inconvenience. Having to drive to the Mater Hospital was an inconvenience. To be told that they don't take kids under the age of 14 is another inconvenience, because now we've got to get him into the car, and he doesn't want to be picked up. Got to get him one of those wheelchairs that only turns at the back. So I get the wheelchair, I bring him out, I go to lift him onto the wheelchair, but by the time I've got him in my arms, I'm thinking, okay, the car's just outside. I'll take him to the car, get him into the car. I got to drive to the Royal Hospital. Walk into the children's ward and the Royal Hospital, and it's packed. Bunged. Friday night is party night for the kids. That's the night whenever they decide to break their legs or to get their infections. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be here for I don't know how long before he gets seen. And my leg, he's crying. Oh. Get him in. The girl asked me his date of birth. Don't ask me those questions. Eventually, having run through some years, I get till the right date, and she says, okay, she fills out a piece of paper, take him up there. Eventually, we get him seen to, we get him x-rayed. He has broken his leg, his shin bone, and we've got to spend the night in the hospital. We've got to keep him overnight. It was an inconvenience, church, let me tell you. I will never look at another bottle of water the same way again. Toilet time, let me tell you, is an inconvenience. I will never look at apple juice again in the same way. Inconvenienced over the past week. I think we've got maybe about 8 hours sleep in the whole week because he doesn't sleep at night time. He's not too bad now, but in the evenings he just wouldn't sleep. He's moaning and complaining, and I'm like, I'll give you something to moan and complain about, breaking your leg, inconveniencing me. We don't want to be inconvenienced, sure we don't, church. We want a life. If you're anything like me, I want convenience in my life. Convenience is, it's stress-free. It's problem-free. It's easy street. I want to live a life of convenience. I want that whenever everything is in order and I know what's going to happen, I'm good with that. I want that convenience in my life. You throw up a broken leg and I'm like, how do I deal with this? This is not what I want at this point in my life. And we want a life of convenience. And so we have people that are advertising on TV, and it's all products that will make our lives more convenient. This will help you. This will, whenever we first had broadband, if you can remember back in the 90s, it took like about 5 minutes to dial up, and you used to hear the dialing tone. And then 5 minutes later, you're on the internet. And so they try to make it quicker, to make it more convenience for us. And now they have fiber optic broadband. This is the quickest ever. If you can get it connected, you come in here and it's like, what's the password? This is not connecting for me. It's inconvenient whenever we don't get a connection. Because we want a life of convenience. Inconvenience means there's going to be trouble. Inconvenience means there's going to be stress. We want a life of convenience, so we go to the convenience store because it's convenient to go there instead of having to go somewhere else that's further away. We don't want to have inconvenience in our lives. We don't want our lives to be inconvenienced in any way, shape, or form. We want a life of convenience, but I want to tell you today that God is a God of inconvenience. Let's think of Moses for a second. Okay, so Moses does something that he shouldn't have. Ends up killing an Egyptian and fleeing for his life. But he spends the next 40 years living a life of convenience. Because all he's doing is he's got his father-in-law's sheep, and he's taking them out into the pastures. He's taking them out into the desert places. He's walking his father's sheep. This is convenient for him. He goes out during the morning. He walks the sheep. He brings them back again a couple of days later. He goes out again in the morning, walks the father's sheep about, the father-in-law's sheep about, comes back again. It's easy. It's convenient. Until one day God shows up in the midst of a burning bush and tells Moses, you got to go back to Egypt. And Moses is like, no, send someone else. Why? Because it's inconvenient for me to leave my life of convenience and go and do what you want me to do, God. No, I will live my life of convenience. I will live my life of ease. It's easy for me just to walk the sheep every day. This is what I've been doing for 40 years. This is what I'm used to. This is convenient for me, God. Send someone else. Don't want to be inconvenienced. What about Jonah? The man looked at the book of Jonah a month or so ago. We looked at the life of Jonah in our men's Bible study. And Jonah it says in chapter 1 of Jonah that the word of the Lord came to Jonah saying, go to Nineveh. And Jonah's like, no, I will go the opposite way. It's inconvenient for me, God, to go and talk to those people. They don't deserve to be saved, God. They don't deserve your grace and they don't deserve your mercy, God. I'm not going to go there. That's too much of an inconvenience for me, God. I'll go a convenient way. I'll go a way that's convenient for me because I don't want to be inconvenienced. What about Saul? Not King Saul, Saul in the New Testament, who became the Apostle Paul. What was his problem? I mean, he's chasing after Christians and he's killing Christians. He's looking for signed letters that he can go and arrest Christians and have them put in prison. Responsible for the death of Stephen, recognized as the first Christian martyr. What was your problem? His problem was that the teachings of Jesus and the life of Jesus were an inconvenience to him. You see, Jesus was an inconvenience to people. He was an inconvenience to the leaders of his day. He was an inconvenience to the religious people of his day. He was an inconvenience to the religious leaders of his day. He was even an inconvenience to the political leaders of his day. Stick that one in your pipe and smoke it, Martin Mueller. Comes up with a statement during the week that the church shouldn't be preaching to politicians. The politicians need the church. And the problem is that whenever you begin to teach morality to people who don't want to hear morality, that want to live their own lives, they do not want to be inconvenienced with the teaching of morality, and that's the problem. And that's why people make statements that the church shouldn't be preaching to us. You need to hear the message of the gospel, politicians. Stormont needs to hear what's taught in the Bible, and this nation needs the Bible more than ever. Don't dare tell us that we cannot preach. You need to listen. Sinn Féin needs to listen. DUP even needs to listen. Ulster Unionist Party needs to listen. This message will be an inconvenience to the politicians. But it needs to be taught, and it needs to be preached. Jesus was an inconvenience to many people in his day, and his message is still an inconvenience today. So it was an inconvenience for Saul. Saul didn't like the teachings of Jesus. Saul didn't like the fact that people were proclaiming Jesus Christ to be alive. Saul didn't like the fact that they were proclaiming him to be the Messiah, that they were proclaiming him to be one who had died and who had risen from the dead and who was alive and seated at the right hand of the Father. Saul didn't like that. It was inconvenient. It was inconvenient teaching for him. And Jesus meets him on the road to Damascus. See, Jesus' teaching was inconvenient. Love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. Huh? No. But do you know what they did, Jesus? Do you know what they did to me? Do you know what they said about me? Do you know the messages that they preached about me on Facebook, and you want me to love them and pray for them? I'm with you because I struggle. I struggle with it. It's as much as an inconvenience for me as it is for you, although you don't want to admit it. I struggle with it. Love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. Deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. The cross speaks of crucifixion. Who teaches like that? Take up your cross, and that's too much of an inconvenience for me to carry a cross, Jesus. So if it's okay with you, I'll just not. Rich young man comes to Jesus and he asks him the question, I want to follow you. I want to be one of your disciples. What have I got to do to be one of your disciples? And Jesus is like, well, obey the commandments. And he's like, yeah, I've done all that. I've done all that. And Jesus is like, okay, well, sell everything you've got then and come and follow me. That's not how you do ministry, Jesus. That's not how you do evangelism. That's not how you get people into the church, Jesus. Because what you should be thinking about is, hey, this is a rich man. If he's going to tithe, because it'll make up for the other people that aren't tithing because it's too inconvenient for them. So this is going to make up for that. And the amount of money that he's got, let me just total this up a minute. So if he was to give that and go, oh, okay, so this is what you do. You just pray this simple prayer after me. Okay, lift up your hand. Okay, you're saved now. You're following me. Okay, let me show you here about tithing. Let me show you here the gift aid form. And you fill that out. You know, it's an inconvenience for some people to fill out, but for you, you know, you should be okay with this. You fill this out and fill it and follow me. And Jesus is like, no, go and sell it and give it away. And then you come and follow me. And the rich young man goes away with his head down because it was too inconvenient for him to sell everything that he had and follow Jesus. His riches were more of a convenience for him, and he wanted to live a life of convenience. Sometimes we can kind of say the right things. Yeah, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and it all sounds good. I'm going to follow Jesus. And then whenever it really comes to it, to what Jesus requires of us, then sometimes it's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Jesus is inconvenient. Do you know that whenever God calls you to do something, that it's going to be inconvenient? When God calls you into your destiny, it is going to be inconvenient. Your future, I want to point at the screen, that means next slide. Your destiny, your calling, your God-ordained future lies beyond the road of inconvenience. You want to grow in God, it's going to be inconvenient. You want to get to where God is calling you to be, it will only be found along a road of inconvenience. Are you willing to walk the road of inconvenience today, church? His calling will be inconvenient. But you see, we don't want to be inconvenienced, even if it's by God. Even if it's God is the one that is going to inconvenience us. See, very often what we want to do is we want the nice, wee, convenient Christian life. Well, I'll come to church on Sunday morning, 11:15. That's not too early. I can get out of bed and get into church for 11:15. So I'll come to church on Sunday morning. But that's it. You know, there's something on Sunday. You want me to come to Fireland? There's something on Sunday night. What time does it start at? Look, I'll just come on Sunday morning because that's what's convenient for me. There's a what? There's a men's Bible study. Okay. Okay. There's a women's. The women get together. All right. Okay. What if I just come to like one thing a month on a Sunday night? Because that's what's convenient for me. You know, I don't want to be inconvenienced and come into like everything that's happening. You want me to put my name down for the creche? Oh! Are you serious? You want me to look after someone else's children while they sit in church and be ministered to? You want me to sign up the kids' life to look after the young children? Have you seen them run about the hallways when they should be in worship? And you want me to look after them? Are you crazy? Maybe I should go to a more convenient church. Because that's what's convenient for me. I'll live my Christian life according to what's convenient for me. It's kind of crazy, you know, whenever you look at John chapter 6. John chapter 6 finishes with many people walking away from him. Everybody begins to desert him. Many disciples desert Jesus. That's how the section is labeled. They turn and they walk away from Jesus. You know, whenever we think about Jesus, we think about crowds that are following him. We think about everybody that is worshiping him. We think about everybody, they just want a piece of Jesus. We talk about Jesus as like some kind of superstar in his day because everybody's following him. There are crowds that are following Jesus. We think of the feeding of the 5,000, which kind of fits in appropriately because that's where chapter 6 starts. Chapter 6 starts this way. It'll be on the screen. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. This is not a trick question, but why were the crowds following Jesus? I'll read this again. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Why did the crowds follow Jesus? Because of the signs. They begin to see what Jesus can do. And they become more interested in what Jesus can do than who he is. And so chapter 6 goes on, and the crowds that are following him, among those crowds are 5,000 men, not including the women and the inconveniencing children with their broken legs and sniffles, shouting and screaming. Are we nearly there yet? And it's at this point that Jesus feeds them all with 5 loaves and 2 fish. This is the feeding of the 5,000. And you think, wow, Jesus has got a following for life after what he did for them. Verse 22 says this, it says, the next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore, that was close, opposite shore of the lake, realized that only one boat had been there and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but that they had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread. Everybody say bread. Where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. He's talking about the feeding of the 5,000. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. So what they've done is Jesus has fed them. Nighttime has come. Sends his disciples ahead of him. He walks on water to the disciples. The disciples are somewhere else. Jesus is somewhere else. The crowds then begin to think, right, where's Jesus? We got to go follow him again. I mean, why wouldn't you? Of course they're going to follow Jesus. They're in search of Jesus. They catch up with him. And this is what Jesus says to them. Very truly, I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed. So at the start, they were only following him because of the signs that he performed. But now, because you ate the loaves and had your fill, they're following him because he fed them. They're following him because he gave them bread to eat. They're still more interested in what Jesus can do for them as opposed to who Jesus is. And at this point, there's a conversation that takes place, and Jesus declares himself to be the bread of life. And they begin to talk about the manna that their forefathers, that their ancestors received in the desert. They're talking about the time whenever Moses took the children of Israel out of Egypt and they're wandering in the desert, and God fed them with manna from heaven, with bread from heaven. So God feeds them with bread from heaven, and Jesus performs this miracle with just 5 loaves, and everybody gets enough bread, and they bring in 12 basketfuls of bread at the end after everybody has had their fill. And so they begin to talk about bread. Well, God fed our ancestors with bread, and you fed us with bread. And they're looking for more bread. You followed me because you ate the bread and had your fill. And so they're looking for Jesus because they want more bread. They're looking for Jesus because they want more of what he can do for them. And they're beginning to miss who it was that was actually feeding them. So they've had their fill. And Jesus declares himself to be the bread of life. I'm the bread of life. I am the one that has come down from heaven. Your ancestors had bread, but it rotted. After a day, it was rotten, and God fed them again the next day. But my bread, me, I'm spiritual food for you. I'm spiritual nourishment for you. And then he makes this statement in verse 53. He says, I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up in the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in them. Now, hold up a minute. We got to eat your flesh and drink your blood. See, the problem was they were still thinking of the bread from the day before. And Jesus is declaring himself to be spiritual nourishment, because it's our spirits that need fed. It's our spirit that needs nourished. And very often in life, we feed our spirit with junk food. And Jesus is declaring himself, say, eat of who I am. And they didn't get it. They missed it. And the reason that they left was that they just didn't get it. Their minds were still on the food. Because every time that Jesus is mentioning bread, they're thinking of bread that they had the day before. And so they're still looking to Jesus as one who can feed them in the natural. But Jesus is declaring himself and showing himself to be food for the spirit, which is so much more important than food in the natural. Why are you a Christian? Why do you come to this church? Why have you chosen to be here today? Why have you chosen this church to be your church? Is it because you love the worship? Is it because you love the preaching? No, it's not that. Is it because, I don't know, what is it about this place that you want to come to this place? What is it about here? What is it about Christianity that you want to be a Christian? See, here's the problem is that if you begin to make it about something that it was never meant to be, you leave. Jesus was asked the question in John chapter 6, what shall we do? Jesus' response was very simple, believe in me. The one who was sent by God, just believe in me. Make it about me. As Jesus was offering himself as the bread of life, he was saying, make it about me, but they constantly made it about the bread. And if you make it about something other than Jesus, that something is going to fail you. That something is going to let you down. At some point, that something while you're here will probably not be here. And then you leave. And if you make your Christian walk about something other than Jesus, you're going to get let down. And you're going to leave. You're going to desert. You're going to walk away from Jesus. Not even just this church, but you're going to walk away from Jesus. Because offense is going to rise up within you. And you're going to walk away from Jesus. Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. He's saying, make it about me. Don't make it about the bread. Don't make it about this, about that. Don't make it about me. Have an intimate relationship with me. Keep your eyes focused on me. You see, when you don't get it, you'll only ever see the inconvenience. Oh, well, the worship wasn't great this morning, or the preaching wasn't good this morning, or the creche is a mess. Nobody wants to do the creche. I can't do the creche. Nobody else is doing the creche. It's youth and kids stuff. And then you begin to see the inconveniences of church life when you make it about the other things. But when you make a decision based on inconvenience, it will lead you to your destiny, because your destiny lies along the road of inconvenience. But when all you see is just the inconvenience, then you'll make a decision based on convenience instead of calling. You'll make a decision for your life based on what's convenient for you instead of God's calling on your life. In verse 67 of chapter 6, Jesus turns to his disciples. Everybody has left. You see, this is the difference between the crowd and the true followers. We look at people with big churches and we think, wow. And I'm not saying that just because someone has a big church doesn't mean that this applies. But having a big church is not always a sign that the anointing of God is on that place. Because the crowds leave Jesus. 5,000 men were fed. Women and children on top of that. And because of the inconvenience, they leave. And he turns to his disciples and he says to them, are you going to leave me too? Are you going to walk away just like everybody else? Are you going to be like the crowd? And Peter responds, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. You see, Peter got it. Peter didn't make it about the bread. Peter made it about Jesus. You're the Holy One of God. You're the one that we've been waiting for. You're the one that is spoken of in the Old Testament prophets. Where are we going to go? What else are we going to do? We've been following you, and so we're going to leave you and go back to what we were doing before. Go back to the convenience. No, would rather live a life of inconvenience with you, Jesus, because it's the most amazing life that we could ever live, and you're the Holy One of God, and we're going to follow you. It's inconvenient, but we're going to do it anyway. You see, God is a God of inconvenience, but I want to tell you today that He is conveniently inconvenient. He is conveniently inconvenient. You see, it may well be an inconvenience for us, but our message is going to be convenient for others. And the inconvenience that will come upon your life will bring a convenience to other people as they get to hear the gospel, as their lives begin to transform and change. And so I want to encourage you today, as I come to a close, to live a life of inconvenience, to walk a road that is inconvenient for you, because someone else's life depends on it. Moses was inconvenienced, but he went back anyway. He probably went back to go back to stupid Egypt. I could be leading sheep and I've got to go back here. This is an inconvenience to me. But he went back anyway. And he saved a nation. He took a nation out of Egypt and led them into freedom. Jonah, more than anybody, kicking and screaming, you're going to save those people after everything that they have done, after the way they've been. And he goes back into Nineveh and he preaches and he tells them that they've got to change their ways or God's going to condemn them. And they change. And even after they have changed, Jonah's still sitting there by a tree. God, I knew you were going to save them. I knew once I went in there, because you're full of grace and you're full of mercy. And I knew you were going to save them. God, I just knew it. And now you've done it. Now they're saved and now they've changed. And now your mercy's on them. And I'm sitting here, sunburnt under a tree. But it was convenient for them to hear the message because they changed. Saul changes. You probably would do after seeing what he saw and after being blinded for 3 days. Changes his name to Paul. And he becomes an apostle, one of the greatest apostles that the church has ever known, planting hundreds of churches, being an amazing man of God, spreading the gospel to the places that he did. Out of his inconvenience, convenience came for towns and for cities and for nations. And what's it going to be like for us? You see, there will be an inconvenience when God called you. Worship team, come please. There will be an inconvenience. There's an inconvenience in coming to God. Because the first thing as God is calling us, as God is maybe challenging us to get saved, as God is challenging us to become a Christian, there's an inconvenience because the first thing that we think about is, what are my mates going to think about me? I can't go out drinking anymore. I can't go out partying anymore. I can't be doing the drugs anymore. I can't live the life that I've been living, and that's an inconvenience for me. Can I be honest with you? It's not that much of a life that you're living. These people will tell you because they have been there. They have lived that life. And now they live a life for Christ. And there is no comparison. And what you find is that whenever you become a Christian, whenever you experience the grace of God in your life, whenever you experience and you taste of the bread of life that is Jesus Christ, you don't even want to go back. That was Peter. To whom shall we go? Once you experience Jesus, then you're like, where shall I go? I don't even want to go back. I don't want to go back to that life. And suddenly you realize that all these things that you'd stacked up as reasons not to get saved were never really reasons in the first place. Then you begin to question, why did I hold off for so long? Why did I allow those things to keep me back for so long? You look at them. When you look at those, then you look at the inconvenience of God. You look at the inconvenience of Christ. But whenever you look to Jesus, you then look at the inconvenience of the world and what the world has to offer. Christian, your destiny, your calling, your God-ordained future lies along that road of inconvenience. Can I encourage you as I finish today to stop looking for the convenient Christian lifestyle? Do you know what that's called? It's called religion. Stop looking for the convenient Christian lifestyle because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. God is a God of inconvenience. But I want you to allow the God of inconvenience to inconvenience you to the point where you see the convenience of what you're called to. Walk that road of inconvenience, church. It will lead you to the most amazing place that you can ever.
Thank you for listening to the New Life Weekly podcast. For more resources, follow us on our Twitter feed at NLCC Media or subscribe by sending an email to blog@nlcc.media.